Northern Ethiopia, Simeon Mountains. The flight path traces north, not west, crossing ancient Assyrian deportation routes before descending into Ben Gurion Airport. In March 2023, the Israeli Interior Ministry finalized approvals for another wave of Ethiopian Jewish returnees. For immigration officials, it is humanitarian policy. For others watching the timing, it is something else entirely. This is not coincidence. A tribe vanished in 722 BC when Assyria shattered the northern kingdom. Their trail did not lead to Central Asia or Europe. It moved south into the Horn of Africa, where communities preserved Sabbath timing and dietary laws for 27 centuries without rabbinic contact. Last year, Israel recognized them. The planes are landing now. The prophecy called them scattered among the nations and promised regathering from the ends of the earth. The government sees demographics. Prophetic scholars see Isaiah chapter 11 verse 11, the second ingathering. Both see the same convoys forming, the same families boarding flights, the same ancient identity finally acknowledged. They were not lost. They were preserved. In September 2019, you missed something. While global media focused on election cycles and trade wars, the Israeli cabinet quietly approved expanded pathways for Falash Murrah recognition, Ethiopian origin Jewish communities whose ancestors had converted under pressure but maintained traditions in isolation. By March 2023, the Interior Ministry had processed thousands more applications. The Addis Ababa to Tel Aviv air corridor became a modern exodus route. For Israeli officials, the calculus was straightforward: strengthen demographic balance, integrate diaspora communities, and fulfill law of return obligations. But here's what makes this specific approval wave different. The communities being recognized trace their lineage not to Judah, the southern tribe that preserved Judaism through the Babylonian exile, but to the northern tribes scattered by Assyria in 722 BC. According to 2 Kings chapter 17, those tribes were deported and scattered among the nations. 10 tribes vanished from the historical record. Issachar was among them. Genesis 49 verses 14 and 15 describe Issachar as a strong donkey, crouching between the sheepfolds, cryptic imagery suggesting agricultural settlement and burden bearing. The tribe occupied the Jezreel Valley in ancient Israel, fertile lowlands stretching from Megiddo to Mount Tabor. After Assyria's conquest, they disappeared. No Babylonian return, no Second Temple presence, nothing, until Ethiopian Jewish elders began claiming Issachar ancestry in the 20th century, preserving oral genealogies that anthropologists initially dismissed. Then government approval started arriving. Non-governmental organizations documented traditions, rabbinical councils reviewed cases, and someone noticed the timing. Why this community? Why now? The modern decision appeared bureaucratic until you overlay it with 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 32, which describes Issachar's defining characteristic: men who had understanding of the times to know what Israel ought to do. Discernment, timing, strategic awareness. The tribe known for reading seasons was returning in a season many believers see as prophetically significant. Not coincidence, they argue. Convergence. You expected the trail to lead east. Assyrian deportation routes moved conquered populations toward Mesopotamia, Persia, the Silk Road corridors. That's where researchers looked for centuries, toward Central Asia, the Caucasus, and remote mountain communities in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Some searches yielded results, others dead-ended. But Ethiopia, East Africa, was not on the map until DNA studies started returning unexpected data. In 2012, genetic research published in the European Journal of Human Genetics found partial Levantine markers in Ethiopian Jewish populations, maternal lines suggesting ancient Middle Eastern ancestry mixed with local African heritage. The findings were not conclusive, and they were disputed by some scholars, but they were enough to keep the conversation alive. Then anthropologists documented something stranger: ancient practices preserved in isolation. Pre-rabbinic Jewish practices persisted. Sabbath observance was calculated by older methods. Purity laws matched Second Temple era customs, not medieval rabbinic codes. Dietary restrictions appeared to predate Talmudic elaboration. How does a community in the Horn of Africa maintain first millennium Israelite traditions without contact with mainstream Judaism for 2,000 years. The Assyrian deportation map offers one answer. Amos 9 verse 9 describes the scattering. I will shake the house of Israel among all nations as grain is shaken in a sieve. Not just east, but everywhere. Trade routes connected the Levant to Nile corridors, and Nile corridors to the Horn of Africa. Egyptian Jewish communities existed in antiquity, documented, verified, and continuous until the Islamic era. Could Assyrian exiles have migrated south through Egypt into Ethiopia, establishing settlements that outlasted their northern cousins? Ethiopian Jewish elders say yes. They call themselves Beta Israel, House of Israel. They claim unbroken lineage, and now genetic studies, anthropological surveys, and rabbinical reviews have opened a pathway home. How did identity survive here, isolated and unrecognized for 27 centuries? The numbers do not add up. In 2015, Israeli estimates suggested 8 to 9,000 Falashmura remained in Ethiopia, awaiting potential recognition. By 2020, advocacy groups reported 12,000. By 2023, new surveys pushed estimates toward 15,000. Census discrepancies are not unusual in remote regions. But here's the problem. If these communities preserved Jewish identity across nearly 3,000 years, how many started, how many were deported by Assyria, how many reached Ethiopia, and how many assimilated, converted, or vanished along the way? Ancient records do not provide tribal population counts after the exile. The Northern Kingdom's population before conquest is estimated at 200,000 to 800,000. Issachar's share is unknown. Hosea 7 verse 8 describes the scattered northern tribes as mixed among the peoples, assimilated, blended, unrecognizable. Yet pockets survived. Small communities held onto fragments of identity, oral genealogies, and traditional practices. Beta Israel was not discovered by outsiders until the 19th century. European Jewish travelers found them practicing Sabbath, circumcision, and sacrificial rites on mountaintop altars. No Talmud, no post-biblical Jewish literature, just Torah-based customs, frozen in time. When rabbinical authorities began reviewing their case in the 20th century, the question was not are they Jewish, but which Jewish lineage do they represent? Some said Judah, others pointed to Dan, whose migration traditions include southward routes, but a growing number of Ethiopian community leaders identified as Issachar. The issue became lineage. Why? Because Issachar's ancient reputation aligned with what they preserved: calendrical knowledge, agricultural wisdom, and timing-based discernment. 1 Chronicles 12 verse 32 describes Issachar's expertise as understanding the times and knowing what Israel should do. Timing mattered. Ethiopian Jewish communities maintained lunar calendar calculations independently for centuries. Timing mattered. Seasons mattered. And now, prophetic watchers argue the timing of their return matters. Issachar was known for something specific, and that trait never vanished. Issachar disappears from the biblical narrative earlier than other tribes. After Solomon's kingdom splits in 930 BC, the northern tribes fade gradually from the text, a slow dispersal. Issachar is mentioned sporadically in administrative records, territorial boundaries, and genealogies. But no prophets, no kings, no dramatic stories, just agricultural settlements in the Jezreel Valley, bearing the burden of empire after empire, Egyptian, Aramean, Assyrian. 1 Chronicles chapter 5 verse 26 records the final blow. The God of Israel stirred up the spirit of Pul, king of Assyria, and he carried them away. The northern tribes were deported en masse. Assyria's strategy was population replacement. They removed conquered peoples, resettled them far from their homelands, and sought to eliminate national identity. It worked. By the time Babylon conquered Judah in 586 BC, the northern tribes were already gone. No return, no restoration. The Judean exiles came back after 70 years. The northern tribes never did. Historians mark 722 BC as the endpoint of Issachar's presence in the land. Except one trait never vanished. Across centuries and continents, scattered communities preserved a form of timing-based discernment. Ethiopian Jewish elders calculated Sabbath and feast days independently. So did communities in India, Yemen, and Persia claiming Israelite ancestry. Calendrical knowledge survived. Why? Because timing was sacred. The biblical calendar was not just functional, it was prophetic. Appointed times and set seasons, feast days aligning with divine patterns. Issachar's ancient role was reading those patterns. If that role was preserved across exile, then regathering them carries symbolic weight. For believers, it is not just demographic policy, it is a sign that the season is shifting, that timing is everything, that Issachar's return means something specific. Israel is about to need discernment. 1 Chronicles 12:32 defines Issachar with precision. It says, men who had understanding of the times, to know what Israel ought to do. Scholars debate what understanding of the times means. Some argue it is calendrical expertise, calculating lunar months, intercalating years, setting feast states. Others suggest military or political strategy, reading geopolitical shifts, knowing when to act. Still others see prophetic discernment, interpreting signs, recognizing divine timing, perceiving appointed seasons. All three interpretations share a common thread. Issachar knew when, not just what or how, but when. In ancient Israel, timing mattered existentially. Plant too early, crops fail. March to battle in the wrong season, armies collapse. Miscalculate Passover, the entire nation misses the appointed time. Issachar's role was ensuring Israel did not miss the moment. And now, as Ethiopian communities identifying as Issachar descendants return to the land, prophetic scholars see alignment. End times prophecy is structured around timing. Daniel's 70 weeks, Ezekiel's day for a year principle, Jesus' warning to recognize the signs of the times, Matthew 16:3, Revelation's specific sequences tied to years, months, days. If Issachar's defining trait is discernment of divine timing, then their regathering during a season many believe is prophetically significant carries weight, not coincidence. Convergence. Community leaders among Ethiopian returnees have documented expertise in traditional Jewish calendar calculations, maintained independently across centuries. Anthropologists recorded one elder explaining intercalation methods matching first century practice before rabbinic standardization. How did that survive? Oral transmission, preservation, refusal to forget. For modern Israel, these returnees bring agricultural skills, demographic reinforcement, cultural heritage. For prophetic watchers, they bring something else, confirmation that the timing is right, that pieces are falling into place, that the season is shifting. Calendars matter more than you think. The migration route reconstruction began with linguistics. Beta Israel spoke Ge'ez liturgically, Amharic conversationally, both Semitic languages with ancient roots. Ge'ez shares structural features with Hebrew. Amharic retains vocabulary echoes. Language does not migrate alone. People carry it. So researchers trace backwards, from the Ethiopian highlands to Nile Valley trade routes, from Egypt to Levantine corridors, from Assyrian deportation centers to southern pathways. Isaiah chapter 11 verses 11 and 12 describes regathering from Assyria, from Egypt, from Pathros, from Cush, geographic markers stretching from Mesopotamia to the Horn of Africa. Cush is Ethiopia, Pathros is Upper Egypt. The verse maps a southern route. Historians documented Jewish communities in Egypt from antiquity, Alexandria's Hellenistic Jews, the Elephantine garrison, Nile Delta settlements. These communities connected Mediterranean Judaism to African hinterlands. Trade routes moved people, goods, and beliefs southward. By the medieval period, Ethiopian Jews were isolated but established, practicing forms of Judaism that predated rabbinic innovation. They were not lost. They were distant. When 16th century Portuguese explorers encountered Beta Israel, they reported Sabbath-keeping communities maintaining sacrificial altars, following Levitical purity codes, rejecting Christian and Muslim conversion attempts, evidence of continuity, not invention. The route matched prophetic text. Isaiah's predicted return path included Ethiopia. So did Zephaniah chapter 3 verse 10, which says, "From beyond the rivers of Cush, my worshippers shall bring my offering." Not metaphor, geography. And now, commercial flights from Addis Ababa to Tel Aviv retrace ancient routes in reverse, north toward the land, back from the ends of the earth. Preservation was not accidental. They should not have these customs. Sabbath timing was calculated by direct observation of the moon, not preset calendars. Dietary laws matched Levitical codes without Talmudic elaboration. Purity rituals around menstruation and childbirth predated rabbinic standards. Blood sacrifice on mountaintop altars continued until contact with mainstream Judaism in the 20th century. Ethiopian Jewish practices raised questions anthropologists could not easily answer. How does a community isolated from rabbinic Judaism for 2 millennia maintain first millennium Israelite religion? Beta Israel had no Talmud, no medieval commentaries, no post-biblical legal codes, just Torah-based traditions preserved orally across generations. When Israeli rabbis first investigated in the 1970s, they found practices both familiar and archaic, like encountering biblical Judaism frozen in time. Some customs matched ancient Israelite worship more closely than modern Jewish practice did. Jeremiah chapter 31 verse 20 records God's words about scattered Israel. Is not Ephraim my dear son, therefore my heart yearns for him. I will surely have mercy on him, declares the Lord. Ephraim represented the northern tribes collectively. Issachar was among them. If preservation of ancient practice signals divine protection, Beta Israel's survival becomes evidence of covenant faithfulness, God preserving the scattered until the appointed time of return. Field reports from anthropologists in the 1980s documented community elders reciting oral genealogies, tracing lineage back through named ancestors to Israelite origins, unverifiable historically but consistent across generations. Genealogies recited by elders became a central strand in the case for continuity. In 2002, the Israeli chief rabbinate officially recognized Beta Israel as authentic Jews under the law of return. The decision cited traditional practice, historical continuity, and genetic evidence. Recognition carried legal and practical consequences for migration and absorption. Then DNA entered the conversation. Genetic studies complicated everything. Maternal mitochondrial DNA traces one lineage. Paternal Y chromosome DNA traces another. Ethiopian Jewish populations show mixed results. Some maternal lines have Levantine markers. Paternal lines are predominantly East African. What does that mean? Intermarriage over centuries? Male Israelite exiles marrying local women? Female preservation of Jewish identity through maternal transmission? All three? Science cannot resolve biblical lineage definitions. Tribal identity was passed patrilineally in ancient Israel, but Jewish identity eventually passed matrilineally in rabbinic law. Which applies here? The debate is real, and the answers are not simple. Ezekiel chapter 37, verses 16 to 17 offers prophetic framing. Take a stick and write on it for Judah. Then take another stick and write on it for Joseph. Join them one to another into one stick, that they may become one in your hand. The northern tribes, Joseph and Ephraim, and the southern tribe, Judah, will reunite. Genetic mixing does not negate identity. It reflects survival strategy. Beta Israel preserved Jewish practice and identity through centuries of isolation. DNA shows adaptation. Tradition shows preservation. Both are true. Israeli policy navigates this tension pragmatically, with rabbinical recognition based on practice and continuity, genetic studies treated as supplementary evidence, and final approval given through case-by-case review. Thousands were cleared. Thousands more wait. For prophetic watchers, the genetic debate is secondary. What matters is movement. Scattered populations returning, identity acknowledged, regathering underway. Ezekiel's vision of dry bones reassembling, sinews reconnecting, breath returning, not metaphor. Migration, recognition changes everything. Official recognition came in waves. In 1975, Sephardic chief Rabbi Ovadia Yosef ruled Beta Israel, were descendants of the tribe of Dan. In 1984, Operation Moses airlifted thousands from Sudan during famine. In 1991, Operation Solomon brought 14,000 in 36 hours as civil war collapsed Ethiopia's government. But Falash Mura, those whose ancestors had converted to Christianity under pressure, remained contested. Were they Jews entitled to return or Ethiopians claiming Jewish heritage for immigration benefits? Debates raged for decades. NGOs advocated, rabbinical councils reviewed, government commissions investigated, then approvals accelerated. In 2015, the Israeli government committed to bringing remaining Falash Mura. By 2020, thousands more arrived. March 2023 saw expanded approvals finalized. Among the first families cleared to return were those identifying specifically as Issachar descendants, preserving oral genealogies and calendrical traditions. Isaiah 43 verses 5 to 6 frames the moment prophetically. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bring your offspring from the east, and from the west I will gather you. I will say to the north, give up, and to the south, do not withhold. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the end of the earth. East, west, north, south, all directions. Ethiopian returnees fulfill the south and the end of the earth markers. Scenes include approval stamps in interior ministry offices, boarding passes at Addis Ababa Airport, arrival gates at Ben Gurion, absorption center registrations in the Galilee, human faces, real families, ancient identity finally acknowledged. Recognition is visible and personal, but Issachar is not alone. India's B'nai Menashe claim descent from the tribe of Manasseh. Afghanistan's Pashtuns preserve traditions some link to Israelite origins. Peru's Inca Jews trace ancestry to crypto-Jewish conversos and possibly deeper roots. Each claim is contested. Each community preserves fragments. Each seeks recognition. The pattern is global. Isolated populations maintain traditions, seek acknowledgement, and request return. Israel evaluates cases one by one. Genetic studies, anthropological review, rabbinical approval, government policy. Some communities gain recognition, others remain unresolved, but the pattern is accelerating. Deuteronomy 30 verse 3 describes regathering. Then the Lord your God will restore your fortunes and have mercy on you, and he will gather you again from all the peoples where the Lord your God has scattered you. The language speaks of complete restoration. If Issachar is returning, others may follow. B'nai Menashe began arriving from India in 2005. Over 5,000 have been recognized so far. DNA studies show partial Middle Eastern ancestry. Traditional practices include Sabbath observance, circumcision, and kosher-style dietary laws. Oral traditions claim Assyrian exile origins. Israeli rabbis required formal conversion before granting law of return status, acknowledging historical connection but requiring halakhic compliance. Prophetic interpreters see momentum building. One community recognized, another approved, pieces clicking into place. Each recognition is controversial. Each claim is disputed by scholars. Yet movement continues. Families arrive. Settlements expand. The puzzle assembles. So what happens next? Absorption centers in northern Israel receive returnees weekly now. Not coastal cities. Inland settlements. Galilee region towns. Nazareth Ilit, Carmiel, Tiberias outskirts. Ethiopian families arrive with luggage, documents, hope, and uncertainty. Arrival brings both promise and challenge. Integration is not seamless. Language barriers, cultural adjustment, economic challenges, housing shortages, discrimination from some segments of Israeli society, but also community formation, religious observance in the land, and generational fulfillment. Community bonds form even as obstacles persist. Ezekiel chapter 36 verse 24 describes the process. I will take you from the nations and gather you from all the countries and bring you into your own land. The verse continues with transformation, renewal, and covenant restoration. Transformation is a spiritual claim with real-world consequences. Modern reality is messier. Bureaucracy, absorption struggles, tension between expectation and experience, but arrival is undeniable. Settlement construction expands to accommodate population growth. Agricultural communities in Galilee, historically Issachar's ancient territory, receive new residents, and some returnees express connection to ancestral land, standing in the Jezreel Valley where Issachar once farmed, observing Sabbath in the land for the first time in family memory spanning centuries. Messier human systems meet ancient longings. Human impact is immediate. Children enter Israeli schools, parents learn Hebrew, elders recount oral traditions to researchers documenting the transition. Transition is lived in classrooms and kitchens. One documented account describes an Ethiopian family's first Sabbath in Israel, lighting candles in a small apartment in Nazareth Ilit, reciting blessings their ancestors had preserved across exile. Standing on land their lineage had been removed from in 722 BC. First moments like these carry heavy ancestral meaning. Ethiopia's government watches the exodus with mixed feelings. Losing population, particularly young families, matters, but maintaining diplomatic relations with Israel requires cooperation. Regional optics matter. Neighboring countries see demographic shifts, question motivations, and interpret events through their own geopolitical lenses. Prophetic framing adds another layer. Nations witness restoration, fulfillment of ancient promises, visible regathering. Zechariah chapter 8 verse 23 describes end times recognition. In those days 10 men from the nations of every tongue shall take hold of the robe of a Jew, saying, "Let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you." Recognition here looks like attention rather than hostility. Media coverage tracks each airlift, each settlement expansion, each community arrival. Headlines frame it as humanitarian immigration, demographic policy, historical reunion, prophetic fulfillment, depending on the outlet. Diplomatic maps show migration routes, settlement locations, and regional reactions. African Union statements, Arab League responses, European commentary, U.S. policy positions. Media narratives shape public perception. The timeline accelerates. What took decades now happens in years. What was debated for generations now moves through committees in months. Government approvals that once required prolonged advocacy now process steadily. Acceleration changes political and social calculations. Why the acceleration? Policy streamlining, advocates argue. Demographic urgency, officials claim. Prophetic timing, believers insist. All of these explanations can be true simultaneously. Timing matters to different actors for different reasons. Issachar's role going forward becomes interpretive synthesis. If their defining trait is discernment of times, their return signals that discernment matters now. Regathering precedes larger convergence in prophetic sequences. Tribes return, then temple focus intensifies, then regional conflict escalates, and then final resolution arrives. Issachar's return is read as a sign by many. Matthew chapter 24 verses 32 to 33 teaches sign reading. From the fig tree learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also when you see all these things, you know that he is near at the very gates. Recognize the signs. Understand the season. Know what comes next. Ethiopian families observe Shabbat now in settlements overlooking the Jezreel Valley. Children play where their ancestors farmed. Elders teach calendrical traditions to researchers, documenting the return. What is verified? Government approvals, migration numbers, settlement construction, community integration. What is interpreted? Prophetic fulfillment, divine timing, end time significance. Both perspectives see the same facts. One sees policy, the other sees pattern. Both watch what happens next, because one piece has locked in. Issachar is home. The tribe known for understanding times has returned during a time many believe is significant. Whether strategy or providence, the movement is undeniable. The planes keep landing, the settlements keep expanding, and the next sign is already forming.